It was nearly closing time when the orphaned teacher walked in. Rain clung to her shawl like a second skin, her shoes soaked through, her stomach empty since the night before. She wasn't a beggar. Not in her eyes. She had taught kids how to read, stayed late to clean chalkboards, and stitched her own clothes so she could buy books for her classroom. But that night, she only wanted something warm, just a cup of soup, maybe a leftover biscuit. Instead, what she got was silence. Cold, sharp silence that cut deeper than any hunger ever could. The waitresses turned their backs. The cook never even looked up. One customer smirked, another shook his head. To them, she didn't belong. She was invisible in a place made for people who could afford steak and pie. The diner's lights were warm, but the hearts inside were not. She left without a word. Her pride wouldn't let her beg. But as she stepped into the rain again, something inside her broke, and something else awakened. She looked back at that diner, not with tears, but with quiet fire. That moment wasn't the end. It was the spark, the one that would rewrite everything. Because what they didn't know was this. She wasn't just a hungry woman. She was a woman with a memory like steel, a soul made of fire, and a reason now to rise. And by the time they'd realize it, the tables would turn, and she would own the building they kicked her out of. The next morning, while the diner's staff laughed off another slow night, the orphan teacher was already working. Not in a classroom. Not in any place where her old life had meaning. No, she stood behind a warehouse, scrubbing floors that hadn't been cleaned in years. The pay was small, the hours long. But it was the only job that didn't ask where she came from. They just handed her a mop and looked the other way. And that was all she needed. Each night, she counted her coins in a rusted tin box. Each day, she worked like a shadow. No complaints, no rest, just purpose. She remembered every face from that diner, every shoulder that turned away. But revenge wasn't on her mind. Something bigger was. Something that would outlive her hunger, her shame, and even her past. Because that diner, old as it looked, was listed for sale. The town didn't know it yet, but the owner had debts deeper than the soup he served. And the teacher, with her tin box and silent fire, had already met a woman who knew how to buy property cheap, especially from people desperate to sell. She spent nights studying business forms by candlelight. She wrote notes on scraps of napkins and tissue paper. She stopped waiting for people to offer her a seat. She was building her own table. And while the diner laughed her out into the rain, they didn't realize the storm wasn't behind her. It was inside her now, and it had just begun to move. Just 2 weeks after she walked out soaked in rain and rejection, the diner faced its own storm. Customers had stopped showing up. Whispers about bad service and cold hearts had spread through town like wildfire. It wasn't the food that people avoided. It was the way they treated people. Folks remembered that quiet teacher. Some even saw her leave that night, soaked to the bone, holding her empty stomach like it was stitched to her soul. The town had changed. New diners opened, run by people with kinder faces. And this old place, once a local hangout, became a ghost of itself. Staff started getting sent home early. The owner, once smug and proud, now spent more time crunching numbers than flipping burgers. And behind every red number in his ledger was a reminder: you can't build a business by stepping over people. But while the diner's lights dimmed, the orphan teacher's life was slowly catching fire. Her tin box had grown heavier. She'd connected with a retired banker who remembered her late father, the one who once helped build schools before tragedy struck. That man didn't just offer advice. He offered a loan, not because she asked for pity, but because she had a plan, a real one. That night, the teacher passed by the diner again. This time, not to eat, but to count. She saw the flickering sign, the half-empty booths, and the tired cook wiping down spotless counters. And she knew this place didn't need to be burned down. It was already sinking. All she had to do was wait and be ready to make the right move. Because sometimes the best revenge is resurrection. It was a cold Thursday morning when the diner's owner finally caved. Bills had piled higher than the unpaid staff. The bank had stopped returning his calls. He sat at his worn-out counter with a pen in his hand and desperation in his chest. That's when she walked in, not as a guest this time, but as a buyer. The orphan teacher, dressed in clean second-hand clothes and holding a thin brown folder, took a seat at the same booth they had once ignored her in. The folder held a purchase agreement, a simple one, clean terms, full cash offer, and a clause that said, effective immediately. Full ownership shall transfer to the buyer upon signature. The diner owner looked up at her and blinked. He didn't recognize her at first, but when he did, his face turned pale. Still, he signed, because pride doesn't feed debts. And the woman he once dismissed now held the key to everything he was losing. By evening, the closed sign hung in the window. But not for long. The teacher didn't come to gloat. She didn't fire the staff. She invited them back, one by one, but only those who were kind. The rest, she let go with grace. She painted the walls a soft yellow, added a corner bookshelf for kids, and replaced the old menu with homemade meals priced, so no child would ever go hungry again. She renamed it Second Chances, because that's what no one ever gave her, but what she vowed to give everyone else. The diner wasn't just hers now. It was her classroom, her home, her answer to the night they refused her food. And word spread fast, because people don't forget cruelty, but they never forget kindness either. The diner opened quietly that Sunday morning. No banners, no speeches, just the smell of fresh biscuits and the sound of soft gospel humming through the walls. The sign outside no longer read a name, but a promise, second chances. And before noon, something beautiful happened. People came back, not because of curiosity, but because they remembered. They remembered how she used to teach their kids math with bottle caps, how she stayed behind to clean the school after storms, how she never once complained, even when her own cupboards were bare. And now here she was, not asking for help, but offering it. Old couples sat at the same booths they once shared in silence. Families brought their children and whispered stories of how this woman once read them poems when no one else had time. One man, once too proud to speak to her, left a generous tip and a handwritten note. "I was wrong," it said. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Even the mayor showed up quietly, took off his hat, and shook her hand. The teacher didn't serve food that day to make money. She served because she remembered what it felt like to be ignored, to be cold, hungry, and unseen. She had lived through that pain and now used it as the very thing that would nourish others. And the magic of it all, the diner didn't just heal her. It began to heal the town too. People talked again, smiled again, tipped more, judged less. In a place where she had once been denied a meal, the whole town now sat at her table. And they left full, not just in stomach, but in spirit. Because sometimes, it's not about revenge. It's about building the thing they said you never could, and letting the world taste what they once threw away. Weeks passed, and Second Chances became more than just a diner. It became a symbol. Students hung their drawings on the back wall. Farmers donated vegetables when harvests were good. And on cold nights, no one sat alone unless they wanted to. It wasn't about money. It was about meaning. The orphan teacher, once a face everyone overlooked, now sat at her corner table every morning, sipping coffee brewed with more care than cost. She watched the world she'd built move around her like a living story. She still wore the same worn shawl, not because she lacked anything, but because it reminded her of where she began. People would stop and ask her, "How did you do it?" And she'd simply smile and say, "I remembered what it felt like to be hungry." The diner's old owner drove by once, slowly. He didn't go inside, but he saw the line of people waiting outside, children laughing, elderly folks smiling. He saw the warmth pouring out of the windows like sunlight. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The lesson was already clear. She never raised her voice, never cursed at a soul, but in the quiet work of her hands, in the dignity she carried even when no one gave her a seat, she proved them all wrong. The woman they once refused to serve? She became the one who fed the entire town.